I was standing in the pouring rain, clutching a soggy bus ticket that represented my last $10, while my sister Sage pulled away in her brand new convertible, splashing mud all over my only decent pair of shoes and smirking at me through the rear. You mirror-like eye was nothing more than a stain on her perfect life. In that moment, with the cold water seeping into my socks and Dad's final, cutting words about how I was a disappointment who would never amount to anything still echoing in my skull, I realized that the people who were supposed to love me the most were the ones who wanted to see me fail the hardest. But they didn't know that beneath my thrift store coat and my exhausted expression, I was carrying a secret that was about to dismantle their entire world, a secret I had spent 3 years building in the dark hours between double shifts and sleepless nights. I have to ask you right now, if your own flesh and blood treated you like trash while you were secretly holding the keys to their future, would you have the heart to save them, or would you let them crash and burn just to watch the look on their faces when they realize who you actually are? My story doesn't start at that bus stop, though. It starts 3 years ago in the cramped wood-paneled living room of the house I grew up in, a house that always felt more like a courtroom where I was constantly on trial for the crime of not being Sage. Sage was the golden child, the one who followed in Dad's footsteps into the world of high-stakes real estate, while I was the creative, the dreamer, the one who wanted to build something digital rather than something made of brick and mortar. Dad never saw the value in what I did, and he made sure I knew it every single day, often comparing my meager earnings from freelance coding to the massive commissions Sage was pulling in at his firm. The breaking point came when Dad announced he was retiring and handing the entire family legacy, the firm he spent 40 years building, over to Sage exclusively, leaving me with a small parting gift of $5,000 and a suggestion that I use it to go back to school for something real. I remember the way the air felt in that room, thick with the scent of Dad's expensive cigars and Sage's cloying perfume. As she sat there sipping champagne and looking at me with that patronizing pity that hurts worse than a slap in the face. I didn't scream and I didn't beg. I just took that check, walked out the door, and decided right then that I would never ask them for a single cent or a moment of their time ever again. I moved into a studio apartment that was basically a glorified closet, worked 18 hours a day, and poured every ounce of my resentment and ambition into a software platform I called Foundation, a revolutionary algorithm-driven real estate analytics tool that could predict market shifts months before the experts. I lived on ramen and tap water, wore the same 3 outfits until they were threadbare, and watched from the digital shadows as Sage began to slowly but surely run Dad's firm into the ground with her arrogance and poor decision-making. She thought she was a genius because she inherited a well-oiled machine, but she lacked the actual grit to maintain it, and meanwhile, my little project was gaining traction with private investors who had no idea who I was or where I came from. Every time I saw a social media post of her at a gala or a photo of Dad praising her vision in the local business journal, I just coded harder, fueled by the memory of that day in the living room. Fast forward to the week leading up to that rainy bus stop incident, and things had reached a fever pitch because the firm was facing a massive liquidity crisis after Sage over-leveraged on a series of bad luxury developments. They were desperate, though they were too proud to admit it publicly, and little did they know that the anonymous conglomerate that had been buying up their debt was actually a shell company owned by me. I had reached a point where I was technically their boss, holding the paper on their office building and their family estate, yet they still saw me as the failure, who couldn't even afford a car. That brings us back to that bus stop, which happened because my old beat-up sedan finally died and I had to see them one last time to give them a chance to be human before I pulled the trigger on the acquisition. I'd gone to the office to ask for a small personal loan, a test really, just to see if there was any shred of family loyalty left in them, and they laughed me out of the building. Sage actually threw a handful of change at my feet and told me to get a hobby that didn't involve begging from winners. And Dad just looked away, ashamed that I was even standing there. As I sat on that bus, shivering and soaking wet, I looked at the calendar on my phone and saw the date. In exactly 8 days, the final grace period on their largest loan would expire, and I would have the legal right to seize everything. 8 days. It felt like a lifetime and a heartbeat all at once, and as the bus hissed through the city streets, I saw their faces on a giant billboard promoting the firm's 40-year anniversary, smiling and confident, oblivious to the fact that the girl they just mocked was holding the detonator to their entire lifestyle. I spent those next few days in a daze of final legal preparations, meeting with my board of directors who only knew me as the brilliant, reclusive founder who preferred to work behind a screen. We were preparing for a hostile takeover that would be the talk of the industry, and the irony was so thick I could taste it. But as the clock ticked down, I started to feel this weird hollow sensation in my chest because despite everything they had done, they were still my family, and once I did this, there would be no going back. I was at a crossroads where I had to decide if my need for justice or revenge was greater than the bond of blood that they had already spent years treading on. So that's the situation I was in, and I had to make a choice that would define the rest of my life and effectively end theirs as they knew it. Before I tell you what happened when the clock hit 0, and I walked into that boardroom for the final showdown, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have let the debt expire and taken their legacy for yourself as a lesson? Or would you have revealed yourself earlier and tried to save them one last time? I really want to know if you think I was being cold-blooded or just finally standing up for myself. Okay, so the 8th day arrived, and it was a bright, mocking sort of sunny morning that felt completely at odds with the tension in my gut. I traded my thrift store clothes for a custom, tailored power suit that cost more than my first 3 cars combined, slicked my hair back, and walked into their corporate headquarters with a team of 6 lawyers trailing behind me like a shark's wake. The receptionist, who had watched Sage laugh at me just a week prior, didn't even recognize me at first. She just saw a high-powered executive and stammered as she told us the board was already in session. I didn't wait to be announced. I just pushed open the double doors of the boardroom where Dad was at the head of the table, looking older and more tired than I'd ever seen him, and Sage was frantically pacing, shouting into her phone about extending the deadline. When I walked in, the room went dead silent. Sage looked at me, her mouth hanging open, and she actually had the nerve to snap. "What are you doing here? This is a private meeting for people who actually have business to discuss. Go back to your basement." I didn't say a word. I just took my seat at the opposite end of the table and nodded to my lead counsel, who slid a thick stack of documents across the mahogany surface. Dad picked them up with trembling hands, his eyes darting between the paper and my face, and as he realized that the foundation and the anonymous holding company were one and the same, the color drained from his skin until he looked like a ghost. Sage was still trying to be the alpha, snatching the papers from him and screaming that this had to be a mistake, that there was no way the loser could be the one holding their notes. I finally spoke, and my voice was so calm it surprised even me. I told them that the grace period had expired at 9:00 a.m. that morning, and as of 5 minutes ago, I was the legal owner of the firm, the building, and the family home they were currently living in. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush a person. Dad finally looked me in the eye, not with anger, but with a terrifying kind of realization, and he whispered, "Why didn't you tell us?" I reminded him of the bus stop, the mud on my shoes, the change Sage threw at me, and the 3 years of silence where they didn't once check to see if I was starving or thriving. I told them that I hadn't built this in secret to hurt them, but I had kept it secret because I knew they would only value me if I had something they wanted, and I wanted to see if they could love me when I had nothing. They failed that test. Sage started crying, not the pretty kind of crying she did to get her way, but a jagged, ugly sobbing, realizing that her smirk was the most expensive mistake she ever made. I didn't kick them out on the street that day because I'm not them. I gave Dad a comfortable pension and a small house to live out his days, but I stripped Sage of her title and made her work as a junior agent under a manager who knew exactly how she treated people. She had to learn the business from the ground up, with no family name to protect her, while I took the helm and turned the firm into a global powerhouse using the technology they called a hobby. The aftermath was messy, and a lot of people in our social circle called me heartless for humiliating my family, but most of them were just people who had benefited from Dad's old school cronyism anyway. My life is completely different now. I don't have to clutch bus tickets or worry about the rain, but the most important thing I learned is that the best revenge isn't just succeeding, it's becoming someone that your enemies can no longer even comprehend. They watch me rise from afar now, through the news and the market reports, and I think Dad finally understands what I was building all those years, not just a company, but a version of myself that didn't need his permission to exist. Looking back, I realized that those 8 days didn't just change my bank account. They changed my soul, giving me the closure I never thought I'd get. If you found this story powerful, or if you've ever been the underdog that everyone counted out, please like this video to show your support for the losers who end up winning. Subscribe to the channel for more stories of justice, revenge, and radical life changes, because we have a lot more to share. Don't forget to leave your final thoughts on my decision in the comments. Did I go too far, or did they get exactly what was coming to them? I read every single one of your comments, and I love hearing your perspectives on these wild situations. Thanks for listening to my journey, and I'll see you all in the next story.